Hello everyone, and welcome to my Bold and Beautiful for You channel. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up.
The opulent, sun-drenched living room of the Forrester mansion, usually a sanctuary of whispered confidences and reclaimed passion for Brooke and Ridge, now felt like a gilded cage, the very air thick with the unspeakable weight of a truth that had just shattered their fragile, hard-won peace. The words, delivered in a trembling, heartbreakingly stoic monotone by a mutual acquaintance just an hour earlier, were still echoing in Brooke's mind, a deafening roar that drowned out every logical thought, every promise she had made to her husband, every carefully reconstructed foundation of their latest forever. Nick is dying. It's inoperable. The doctors are giving him months, maybe less. In the devastating wake of that revelation, Ridge's presence, his strong arms attempting to pull her into a comforting embrace, felt not like a solace but a betrayal, a demand for a loyalty her soul could no longer afford to give. "No, Ridge," she whispered, the sound tearing from a place of profound, maternal anguish deep within her, her body rigid and unyielding as she pushed back against his chest, a gesture so final it made him physically stagger. "Don't. Just don't." His face, that beloved, arrogant, eternally confident face, crumpled in confusion and a dawning familiar fury. "Logan, what is this? What are you doing? We both know Marone is a lot of things, but this has to be some kind of manipulative ploy, some sick trick to get your attention." But Brooke was already shaking her head, her vision blurred by a flood of tears that were for another man, her voice gaining a steely, terrifying resolve as she looked at him, truly looked at him, and saw not her destiny, but an obstacle to a higher, more urgent calling. "It's not a trick, Ridge. It's the truth. I've already spoken to his doctor. I've seen the scans. There's no denying it. He's sick, he's terrified, and he's alone." Ridge's hands flew up in exasperation, his voice rising to a boom that once would have cowed her but now just sounded hollow, selfish. "So what? What does that have to do with us? With our marriage? Brooke, we just got back to each other. We promised. Always and forever. That's what you said. Or does that only apply when it's convenient for you, when there isn't another tragic figure waiting in the wings to pull you away from me?" The accusation, so typical of him, so utterly blind to the cataclysmic shift happening in her heart, was the final push. "This isn't about you and me, Ridge. For once in your life, can you not make this about us? This is about a man I once loved, the father of my child. A good man who is facing the end of his life without the woman he's always considered his soulmate by his side. He needs me." The declaration hung in the air, absolute and unassailable. "He needs me," she repeated, softer now, as if the truth of it was settling into her very bones. "He has no one else, not really. Not like this. And I need to be there for him. I have to be." Ridge stared at her, his jaw clenched so tight a muscle twitched, the betrayal in his eyes so deep it was a physical entity in the room. "So that's it? You're choosing him? You're throwing away our marriage, our family, for a man who is? He couldn't even say the word, the finality of it too horrific to weaponize. "I am not choosing him in the way you think," Brooke cried out, her own frustration and sorrow boiling over. "I am answering a call that is more important than romance, more important than our endlessly complicated history. This is about basic human decency, about being a comfort, a friend, a pillar for someone who is drowning. How can you not see that? How can you be so monumentally selfish?" He took a step back, his expression shifting from hurt to a cold, stoic mask she knew all too well. The Ridge Forrester who was building his emotional fortress, brick by bitter brick. "Selfish? You're calling me selfish? You're the one tearing our world apart because you can't resist playing the angel of mercy, the saintly Brooke Logan, rushing to the side of any man who looks at you with pathetic, needy eyes. You have a pattern, and it's destroying us over and over again." The old wound, the eternal accusation of her destiny as a slut, from a decades-old magazine headline, flared between them, but this time it had no power over her. The stakes were too high. "Call it what you want, Ridge. Judge me, hate me, I don't care anymore. My mind is made up. I'm going to him. Today. Now." She moved to sweep past him, toward the staircase, toward packing a bag and leaving this gilded life behind for a sterile hospital room and the heartbreaking task of saying goodbye, But he caught her arm, his grip firm, desperate. "Brooke, if you walk out that door, if you choose to go to him now after everything we've fought for, don't expect me to be waiting for you when this is all over. This isn't a pause. This is a choice. And if you make it, you are choosing to end us." She stopped, her shoulders slumping under the immense weight of his ultimatum. She turned her head, her eyes meeting his, and in that moment, he saw not the conflicted, waffling woman he was so often forced to forgive, but a woman of unshakable, tragic conviction. "Then I guess this is goodbye, Ridge," she said, her voice barely a whisper, yet filled with a terrifying finality. She pulled her arm from his grasp, and this time he let her go, his hand falling limply to his side as he watched the love of his life, his Logan, walk away not in a fit of passion or a misunderstanding, but in a calm, devastating act of mercy for another man. The grand door of the mansion closed behind her with a soft, definitive click, and Ridge was left alone in the suffocating silence, the ghost of her last words. "He needs me," a haunting epitaph for a marriage that, once again, had crumbled under the weight of a love that was, for Brooke, ultimately about need more than it was about want. The silence in the mansion's foyer after Brooke left was a physical, suffocating presence, pressing in on Ridge from all sides. The ghost of her perfume, that soft, familiar floral scent, still hanging in the air, a cruel mockery of her absence. He stood rooted to the spot, his mind a chaotic whirlwind of fury, disbelief, and a profound, gut-wrenching sense of abandonment that was all too familiar. "He needs me." The words played on a torturous loop in his mind, each repetition stripping away another layer of his composure. How could she? After every storm they had weathered, every betrayal they had overcome, every single time he had taken her back, forgiven her, fought for her against his own family, against logic, against his own better judgment, for it to end like this? Not with a bang, not with a dramatic affair, but with her walking away from him, from them, to hold the hand of another man because he was sick. The injustice of it was a white-hot brand searing his soul. Nick Marone. The name was a curse on his lips. Always there, a specter from her past, the good man, the steady rock she so often contrasted against Ridge's perceived tempestuousness. And now in his final act, Nick had achieved what he never could in life. He had taken Brooke from him completely, not through strength but through weakness. The ultimate manipulation. A terminal diagnosis was a trump card Ridge could never play, a battlefield on which he could never compete. How do you fight a dying man? You can't. You can only stand by and watch as the woman you love is consumed by a pity so vast, it eclipses her love for you. Declarations and fierce protection was fundamentally strong. He was Rich Forrester. He didn't need to be saved. He provided, he protected, he commanded. But Nick? Nick was alone. Nick was sick. Nick was vulnerable. And in the twisted calculus of Brooke Logan's heart, vulnerability was a siren's call she was physically incapable of resisting. She was choosing to be a nurse over a wife, a comfort over a partner. The thought made him sick. He pictured her there, already at Nick's bedside, her hands clasping his, her eyes full of that tender, tragic sympathy, building a fortress of shared suffering around them that he, Ridge, could never breach. He would become the villain in their story, the cruel, unfeeling husband who didn't understand, who tried to keep her from her sacred duty. The narrative was writing itself, and he was powerless to stop it. Meanwhile, across town, Brooke's hands were indeed clasped around Nick's, but the reality was far from the serene, saintly image festering in Ridge's mind. The hospital room was dim, smelling of antiseptic and underlying despair. Nick, always so robust, looked pale and shrunken against the stark white pillows, the foreline in his arm a stark reminder of the brutal truth. When she had entered, his eyes, clouded with pain and medication, had lit up with a hope so raw and desperate it had nearly broken her. "You came," he'd whispered, his voice raspy. "I knew you would." And in that moment, any lingering doubt she had about her decision vanished. This wasn't about romance. This was about humanity. This was about the man who had loved her unconditionally, who had given her a beautiful daughter, who had never once, even at their worst, looked at her with the searing, judgmental disappointment that Ridge so often wielded. Sitting here, listening to the steady, ominous beep of the heart monitor, Ridge's ultimatum felt like a distant, petty argument from another lifetime. How could he not understand that some things transcended marriage? Some debts of the heart had to be paid. She owed Nick this. She owed him peace. She owed him the knowledge that he would not face the abyss alone. As she gently smoothed the blanket over his chest, feeling the frailty of his body beneath the thin hospital cotton, a fresh wave of grief washed over her, not just for Nick, but for the life she was consciously, deliberately setting ablaze. She was burning down her present, her future with Ridge, to provide warmth and light for a man whose future was measured in weeks. It was a catastrophic, heartbreaking trade, but in her soul, it felt like the only morally defensible path. He needed her. And for Brooke Logan, that had always been, and would always be, the most compelling call to action imaginable, a force of nature stronger than even her legendary love for Ridge Forrester. The path was set, and the aftershocks would ripple through their lives, tearing families and alliances apart, leaving everyone to pick up the pieces of a tragedy that was still, terrifyingly, unfolding. The fallout was immediate and radioactive, spreading through the Forrester and Logan families with the speed of a California wildfire. Steffi, hearing the news from her father, whose voice was a gravelly, broken thing she barely recognized, felt a white-hot fury that eclipsed any sympathy she might have held for her mother's predicament. "She did what?" she hissed into her phone, pacing the sleek, modern floor of her cliffside home. "To be with Nick Marone? Dad, this is insanity. This is Brooke at her most pathological." She didn't see a selfless act of mercy. She saw a repeat of a sick, familiar pattern. Her mother's entire identity was built on being indispensable to a man in crisis, and she was now leveraging a terminal illness to play the role of ultimate martyr. "She's not just leaving you, Dad," Steffi continued, her voice sharp with conviction. "She's making a spectacle of it. She's making you the bad guy for expecting your wife to actually be your wife. Don't you see? She gets to be the saint, and you're left looking like the selfish monster." It's brilliant in a twisted Logan kind of way. Her loyalty was, as always, fiercely and unambiguously with her father. She promised him she would handle the company, shield him from the prying eyes and whispered gossip at Forrester Creations, and make it clear to everyone which side of this moral divide was the right one. Hope, on the other hand, was torn apart, a child caught in the crossfire of a war she never asked for. Hearing the news from a distraught and angry Steffi felt like the ground was giving way beneath her feet. Her mother, leaving Ridge for her biological father, who was dying. The information was too colossal, too devastating to process. One part of her was shattered for Ridge, the man she had come to love and respect as a stepfather, who was clearly in immense pain. Another part, a deeper, more primal part, was screaming in agony for her dad. Her dad, the man who had always been her rock, her soft place to fall, was facing death, and he was not alone. He had her mother. As conflicted as she was about Brooke's decision, a treacherous small part of her heart was profoundly grateful that her father would have the love of his life with him at the end. How could she condemn her mother for that? How could she choose a side between the man who raised her and the man who was her blood? Sitting in her serene, sunlit living room, the colors of the room seemed too bright, the world too normal, while her personal universe collapsed into shades of gray. Liam watched her, his expression pained and helpless. "Hope you don't have to have an opinion on this right now," he said softly, taking her hand. "This is between your mom and Ridge. Your only job is to be there for your dad." But she knew it wasn't that simple. In their world, neutrality was a sin. You were either for someone or against them, and her silence would be interpreted as a betrayal by someone she loved. Back at the Forrester mansion, Ridge had found a bottle of expensive scotch and was attempting to drown the echoing silence. The initial explosive rage had subsided into a cold, hard knot of certainty in his gut. Steffi was right. This wasn't a deviation from Brooke's pattern. It was the ultimate expression of it. He thought of all the times, the James Warba situation, her endless entanglement with Bill Spencer, even her brief, misguided alliance with Deacon. It was always the same. A man presented a problem, a vulnerability, and Brooke Logan, the great fixer, would pour all her emotional and physical energy into him, leaving her marriage a barren, neglected wasteland. He had always taken her back, believing that their destiny was stronger than her compulsion to rescue. But this was different. This was a final act. She had chosen to be Nick's angel of mercy, and in doing so had assigned Ridge the role of the Grim Reaper, the cruel husband who would deny a dying man his last wish. It was a public relations masterstroke of emotional manipulation, and he had fallen for it. He had let her walk out. He had issued the ultimatum, and she had called his bluff with the one card he couldn't beat. The humiliation burned as hot as the liquor in his throat. He wasn't just losing his wife. He was being made a fool of, upstaged by a man on his deathbed. At the hospital, the dynamic was shifting into a new, painful equilibrium. Nick had drifted into a fitful sleep, his breathing shallow. Brooke gently extracted her hand from his, her fingers stiff, and walked to the window, staring out at the glittering, indifferent lights of Los Angeles. The high of moral certainty was beginning to wear off, replaced by the chilling reality of what she had done. She could still feel the ghost of Ridge's grip on her arm, see the shattered look in his eyes before the cold mask had slammed down. She had broken him. Again. And this time she knew it was for good. There would be no coming back from this. No tearful reunion in a foreign country. No grand gesture that could erase the fact that she had chosen to be here, in this sterile room of death, over the warmth of their marital bed. A sob caught in her throat and she stifled it, pressing a fist to her mouth. She couldn't fall apart. Not here. Not now. Nick needed her to be strong. He needed her to be a rock. But who was her rock? For decades, through every crisis, the answer had always been Ridge. Even when they were apart, the possibility of him was her foundation. Now, she had personally and purposefully dynamited that foundation. She was utterly alone, anchored only to a tragedy in the making. The weight of it was crushing. She was doing the right thing, the human thing, so why did she feel like she was committing a slow, agonizing form of emotional suicide? The phone in her purse buzzed again. Hope probably. Or maybe even Eric. She couldn't face them yet. She couldn't bear to hear the judgment or the pleas. She was in the eye of the hurricane, and the only sound was the relentless, accusing beep of the heart monitor, a metronome counting down the final seconds of not just Nick's life, but of her life with Ridge, and the woman she had once believed herself to be. It would be a shame if Liam's brother missed the wedding, given how many other things he should have attended recently. Darren Brooks reprised his role as Wyatt Spencer only to hand over the beach house keys to R.J. Forrester Joshua Hoffman. That was ridiculous. Surely Bold and the Beautiful will spend the money to have Darren Brooks back as Wyatt Spencer for the big wedding. I'm sure Liam and Hope intend to bring Wyatt Spencer, so fingers crossed we can get him back. Even if only for an episode. But why mention Wyatt Spencer if he isn't coming? It was already a disgrace that Darren Brooks was not brought back as Wyatt during Liam's fabricated brain tumor narrative, when Hope, Steffi Forrester, Jacqueline McInnes Wood, and everyone else thought he was dying, and then when Liam was shot. Still no Wyatt. It doesn't make sense. And I truly hope they make things right by inviting Wyatt back for the wedding. Let's talk about the second comeback, which we know will absolutely happen. We just aren't sure if the chronology coincides with Hope and Liam's wedding date. It is confirmed that Matthew Atkinson returned to film several episodes. However, it appears that he has left again. Producer Casey Kasperzik expressed his excitement on Instagram at having Matthew Atkinson back on set for a week of filming. That is what he said. So, based on the producer's social media post, Thomas Forrester Matthew Atkinson won't be back for long. But he's coming back 100%. Hope was discussing with her brother Deke Sharp Harrison Cohn a few weeks ago about the challenges she's had establishing her footing with her line after Thomas Forrester left, despite the fact that they worked so well together on Hope for the future. Hope was explaining to Deke why she and Thomas could never work as a pair, and Hope effectively stated that Thomas's role in keeping Beth's existence hidden when Hope and Liam thought she had perished was simply too much to bear. Many fans appreciated her acknowledging that. So, basically, Hope has had an epiphany, and I expect Thomas will return for closure with her. If the Lope wedding occurs later this year, Thomas could stop by to speak with Hope before the big day. Maybe Thomas comes to Hope alone before the wedding to congratulate her, and assure her that she belongs with Liam. It might be in the same line as the recent conversation between Steffi and Hope. This was where Steffi was discussing her engagement to Liam. Steffi claimed they were meant to be. With that chat, Bold and the Beautiful appeared to have finally put an end to Steffi, Liam, and Hope's love triangle. Thomas may show up to tell Hope that he has been reflecting a lot. And Thomas may claim that he understood his preoccupation on Hope was never healthy. Thomas may tell Hope that she was correct to reject his plans. And Thomas may confide to Hope that he has to work on himself before pursuing a new relationship with someone else. But Thomas certainly wants Hope to know he is genuinely thrilled for her. Thomas may also go to see Liam and congratulate him and offer a long overdue apology for everything that happened with Beth and Hope. That would essentially bring us all closure on Thomas and Hope. Now let's talk about the third return. Another comeback that appears to be confirmed. The question is about timing. Henry Joseph Samory, a young actor, was recently sighted on the set of The Bold and Beautiful. Brooke Logan Catherine Kelly Lang was creating a social media post while in the hair and makeup room. In the background you could see the monitor that displayed what they were filming that day. Brooke appeared to be dressed up for a special occasion, as Catherine Kelly Lang was wearing a stunning gown. The monitor behind her plainly showed Henry Joseph Samory shooting sequences as Douglas Forrester, Henry Joseph Samory. He appeared to be wearing a suit. So, I suspect Thomas will return to offer Hope and Liam closure. Also bring Douglas back for the wedding. I'm sure Hope would love to have her adoptive son present when she gets married. Of course, Douglas was quite connected to Liam, his stepfather, for a while. Douglas may attend this ceremony alongside his sister Beth Spencer, Jordan Lynn Ariza. However, I doubt he'll stay. Because Henry Joseph Samory appears in 2 different television series, The Pit and Invasion. Little actor Henry Joseph Samory is preoccupied with other tasks. So Douglas may only be returning for the wedding before leaving again with Thomas. When we saw Matthew Atkinson reprise his role as Thomas Forrester, we knew they were filming Christmas episodes. So, Hope and Liam's wedding planning may continue after Thanksgiving. Perhaps we'll have a Christmas or New Year's Eve holiday wedding. We'll let you know when there are more details on the Big Lope wedding, including the air date.